Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Our guest today is Martin Luther King III, the son of Martin Luther King Jr. He joins us from Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. King.
Thank you.
Like your father, you're yourself a human rights activist. Obviously, your father had famously a dream, but upon discovering the footage of George Floyd under the knee of a police officer in Minneapolis over 2 weeks ago, America actually woke up to a nightmare. What was your reaction?
My reaction when I first heard about the killing of George Floyd, actually the murder, I should say, it was May 25th, which happened to be a holiday in the U.S. and my daughter's 12th birthday. And the first thing that it evoked for me was, wow, this sounds just like Eric Garner in New York, who was held with a chokehold scenario and was killed by a police officer or police officers in New York City. And so that was the first thing. And then the second emotion was anger and frustration and hostility. And what are we going to do so that this never, ever happens to another human being? It was several days later before I saw the actual video. And the video reinforced my feelings. And I had to explain, my wife and I, Andrea, had to explain to our daughter, Yolanda, why this kept happening, because in her mind, her grandfather and grandmother, Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, had devoted their lives to ending this kind of behavior, but yet it keeps repeating herself. Now, mind you, we had seen on February 23rd, a man here in Georgia by the name of Ahmaud Arbery, killed by a former policeman and his son and another gentleman. And then we saw about 3.5 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks now, Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, killed by police. We didn't actually see video from those two until later on, but we saw graphically this video of George Floyd, and we saw the inhumanity of a person, and we saw a police officer become judge, jury, and executioner all in one. And so we began to say, what can we do? This has got to stop. And then to see the nation galvanized and ultimately the world galvanized, and to see these protest demonstrations, most of them peaceful, by the way, some violently. And my dad used to say that riots are the language of the unheard. And yet, while he never condoned violence, he understood what caused some to engage in that kind of activity. But he always hoped that we would have peaceful protests. And as I said, by and large, that is what we are seeing all over the world.
Right. A brother of George Floyd went to testify before Congress. He said he wanted to do this to make sure that his brother, quote unquote, is more than another name on the list that won't stop growing. And he said those words, I'm tired of the pain I'm feeling now, and I'm tired of the pain I feel every time another black person is killed for no reason. Do you think this could really be different this time around? You mentioned the precedents, and you mentioned the fact that there was not a lot happening to change this. Will this be a sea change?
Well, I certainly hope and pray that it is a sea change, because I think that if we do not see change, none of us can predict what is going to happen. And in addition to that, Black people in America spent over $1 trillion last year in this economy. And if Black people made a decision that we're going to stop exercising our buying power with certain consumers, then that would be a dramatic incident. And that is where some of the discussions are going right at this moment. So if we don't see appropriate, responsible changes in a very responsible period of time, that's one of the things that may happen, in addition to others that I don't know. But I really believe that this time is unusual. We have never seen so many demonstrations where white people are almost in the majority of leading those demonstrations. We've never had in every state in the nation. This is the first time, I think, in history that every state, there have been a lot of states, but there's never been every. And then, of course, the world has been captured by this and is standing up saying Black Lives Matter. Finally, the veil has been removed and those who were asleep are awakened. And therefore, it means that the Senate and the United States Congress are going to have to act. They already have proposed legislation. I think this is the moment, this is the time, and I think we're going to see action. And I think we're going to see the kind of action that we've never seen before.
Right. I mean, one precedent was obviously tragically for you. You were 10 years old at the time, I believe, when your father was killed in Memphis in 1968. There were huge demonstrations. But after that, the momentum was somehow lost. Richard Nixon won the election. I mean, aren't we seeing maybe the same thing happening, maybe with Donald Trump campaigning on law and order and actually bringing down this momentum that you're describing?
Well, I think there are a couple of factors that are different. In 1968, most of the demonstrations, or actually a lot of the demonstrating, was looting and violence, and a lot of rioting. And there were over 100 cities that were engaged, but it was mostly Black people. I would say that the overwhelming large number was Black people. These demonstrations are different in the sense that many of them are overwhelmingly white. We've never seen police officers take a knee in support of protesters. We've never seen a sheriff march with the demonstrators or law enforcement, the top law enforcement person in that community of Flint, Michigan. We've never seen a large number of white people who are taking a knee and apologizing for 400 years of mistreatment of Black people. So there's a different energy this time than ever before, and a larger number of people. And as I said, there are huge numbers of whites who often maybe have felt the sentiment, but were silent. So people have become vocal, people have become engaged, young people are engaged. And I think this is different. This is the most, I've never seen anything quite like this in my life.
What would your father say and do today if he were there?
Well, first of all, if my father had lived and he wanted to remove from our nation what he called were the triple evils of poverty, racism, and he said militarism at the time that he was talking, but I changed militarism to violence. So poverty, racism, and violence, he wanted to eradicate from our society. My mother worked throughout her life and lived 30 years or 40 years longer than my father, and she wanted to work to eradicate those evils. Well, I think if my father just arrived here today, he would be greatly disappointed in the leadership of the president and of the government. But he would be very proud of all of those, or pleased that people are demonstrating in a peaceful way to bring about change, and feeling that change was imminent, that people now are empathizing with what you're going through, that people are talking about Black Lives Matter. And oftentimes people thought Black Lives Matter was saying something different. There are some who still believe, well, all lives matter. Well, of course, we know that. But Black Lives Matter also. That is what Black Lives Matter are saying. No one has ever said that no other life is important. But it seems like the treatment that Black people have been getting over and over again feels like Black lives do not matter. So we must ensure that all lives do matter. And certainly now it's focused on Black lives, because Black lives are disproportionately mistreated. 16% of the population in America, Black people represent, but 40, 50, 60, 70% of the jail population. How is that possible unless policemen are profiling Black people? That has to change. So there are a number of changes that we expect to see in a very short period of time.
Donald Trump, is he a racist?
Donald Trump's activities continue to bolster that notion. Yesterday, one of the largest race car entities in the nation, the NASCAR, basically said that Confederate flags can no longer be brought to this actual race, this car race. And military installations that have Confederate named persons who represent those particular bases and forts. Donald Trump reinforced to that element of the population that we're not going to do anything about that. The people want to see, as you see, statues are coming down in the United States and even in Europe. Those who advocated for slavery and holding slave owners, people are pulling those statues down. Now, maybe there's a better way for that to happen, but it's interesting to see that people are doing that all over the world. So Donald Trump continues to exhibit behavior of a racist in terms of his rhetoric. And I don't know that he's going to change that. I hope that he understands. He doesn't seem to understand that he's the president of the United States of America, not the president of one segment of the population. And I think that these statues and these monuments belong in museums. They do not belong in the square of a city where everyone has to come, and they should not be put in a sense of uplifting them because of what they represented. They represented something destructive to a large percentage of people, and that is Black people. And that doesn't mean that they don't need to be acknowledged in a museum, because people that do not know their history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. So yes, Donald Trump does exhibit behavior of a racist, and I hope and pray that at some point he changes that. I don't expect that, but I'm always going to be hopeful.
Thank you very much, Martin Luther King III, for granting us an interview from Atlanta, Georgia. Stay tuned here on France 24 for more news.